Here we are on the Potomac. I'm with journalist and author Len Bracken. He is the author of The Shadow Government, several other books, about 7 or 8 other books. And Len, I've known for 3 years. In my series, I called him Deep Trade until very recently we didn't say his name. But Len has been a Capitol Hill reporter for a long time on Capitol Hill, working with major news outlets. So we are in the middle of a firestorm right now with this China coronavirus versus USA reporting. And I thought it would be good to ask Len, a seasoned reporter on Capitol Hill, for a journalistic critique. So we just reviewed all of the facts of the case and the parts of the case that are not so much facts but potentially speculation. And I'd like to go through that with Len. So take it away from there for what you see so far as the situation.
Yeah, so as I said when we had our discussion, that you should look at maybe several buckets of information, and the first being the genesis of the virus, right? So that's where you've obviously generated the most interest in your reporting, and it's been picked up by several other outlets. And I guess when we discussed it, the key thing is that it was the foreign ministry spokesman. So you really have to nail everything down. When did this foreign ministry spokesman sort of echo what you had said? And in terms of the CDC official that's testified on Capitol Hill, we know when he testified, but the big question marks out there, and the grounds for further research, I would think, would be when was the first U.S. case of the COVID virus, and we, of course, there's some reporting that it might have been in January, but and the press release in February. But is that really the case? I think that would bear further questions. Let's see what else. Basically, the most objective form of presenting information is chronologically, and you're trying to start from the beginning. And that makes sense. And then, so we have the Wuhan World Military Games, and then we have the first case and that's October, the first case in Wuhan in November. And, we really can't know for sure when there was the first U.S. case, right? And so that's...
They say it's January 15th or so in Washington, but that reported so far. But I obviously say it's earlier than that, but following the chronology is your way of telling the story with all the facts, right, that everyone currently accepts.
Right, and then we have this kind of accepted story, which is that it starts with a bat, it goes to the Chinese equivalent of an anteater, and then it goes to the human. Now, I really don't know, where that story comes from. It would be good to nail that down too, and to say, what is the official source of that, right? Government agency or an international agency. And then you also want to, you can invite comments.
Let me do that with each one of those facts that I've reported. So the first one is on March 6th or so, the spokesman for the foreign minister, not the spokesman, not the foreign minister himself, but the spokesman, a guy by the name of Lijian, Lijian, basically said that the virus started with U.S. athletes at the World Military Games. Now, this is 100 different countries coming in. It's 10,000 people, athletes. It's 250,000 volunteers. A lot of the volunteers, having traveled with sports medical teams in the past, but we've not confirmed yet, are nurses, trainers, doctors, etc., in case somebody breaks a leg or, gets shin splints or whatever, right? Or needs some kind of medical care. So that is what Lijian is saying. It was started with the athletes. So, and the contingent of the U.S. athletes was 300 athletes. Okay, this is how I pared down the story. So I started looking for people who had medical backgrounds. First, I looked at competitors. I looked at the Belvoir Eagle, saw that she was there. Maatje Benassi was there on the 20th of October. She was leading in the first couple of laps of the race and then crashed. I looked into her background and said, okay, that's the first person I know for sure was there. I looked into her background, and she was at Fort Belvoir Community Hospital. She also has strong association with the, NATO potentially, and was traveling to Europe quite a bit. Okay, and the driver and a diplomatic courier, which I thought was interesting. Being a 52-year-old athlete on loan basically from Holland, she grew up in Holland, and here, I thought it was important for people to understand who the Chinese minister, one of the people, so that we could start digging down. Now this Chinese...
No, the Chinese foreign minister spokesperson, right?
Right.
Now, but he never pointed to her specifically.
No, he said the 300 athletes.
And all he asked for, he didn't say that they were necessarily the source, but he said that they could be the source and that the U.S. should provide the medical records of all those athletes,
to end speculation.
To end the speculation.
Speculation.
Right.
Okay, great. So that's more precise reporting. So hey, test all the athletes. It'd be like if somebody said, we think it started here, our doctors think it's here. This is state government now, and the state supported newspaper came out and repeated this, Global Times. And so they were saying, hey, test everybody in the U.S. contingency and give us their records so that we could run this down. If it's not you, great. If it is you, then don't stop saying it's China virus or Wuhan virus. Seems reasonable, okay? So we're on total lockdown now here in the U.S. We're on lockdown all over the world. It spread to 100 countries very quickly. It doesn't have the normal organic pattern of a, Chinese peasant virus. It looks like it did emanate from the global games because it went to 100 countries all at once, like by airplane. So, and now we're over 150 countries. So that pattern just wasn't the organic, this is in a Chinese village, and then as people moved up and down the river or whatever. You've been to Wuhan when you wrote New China Virus. You've been to Wuhan.
New China Syndrome, yeah.
New China Syndrome.
I did go to Wuhan, a beautiful place, and of course now it's forever tainted, I think, in everybody's mind, because of this. But I guess what I would say is that you also have these two extremes, right? You have the idea that it could be from the bat to the anteater to the human, or it could be some kind of weaponized, virus equivalent to the weaponized anthrax that was used during 9/11, the emerid strain of anthrax.
Right, and you're very close to that story with Ivans and so forth. So I just said, okay, I basically took one person that I knew was there and did a deep dive and said, just so happens she's the driver for the Supreme Allied Commander, the same people that brought you Libya, the same people who brought you Syria and all the other secret wars that NATO's been involved in. Is this yet another instance of that? Here's one person. Her husband also is on these China games, Maat, and he is also there, and he also has an intelligence background only from surveillance, space warfare command at U.S. Air Force. So okay, I'm expecting these folks to be military people, but they're coming from Fort Belvoir, which in my previous stories has had a heavy intel influence. It is the headquarters of INSCOM, which is the intelligence command for the U.S. Armed Forces. So a lot of these people are sometimes intelligence officers. So if it was a bioweapon, you would want to look at people who were diplomatic couriers. You would want to look for people who were diplomatic couriers for people at the highest level of NATO. And she fits those bills. Now she also is working in a place where she could have recruited, and this is stories I'd done earlier at Fort Belvoir Community Hospital. If she's, that's her job, okay, that's great. She used to work as a dental assistant, but again, I'm just presenting information. I'm just saying that this is an odd Benassi name because patient 0 in Milan, where the world is hardest hit, is also, again, coincidence maybe, but it's Benny Benassi. And if you look at Benny Benassi is this world famous DJ for Madonna, Ali Benassi and Benny Benassi, starting up in Italy, are are both with Madonna, and this thing looks like it's going to become live Corona, like live AIDS, if you remember that. It just seemed like it was too cut out. Now, again, that's very tangential, but I think it's important for people to know who Betty Benassi is. I think it's important for people to know Alyssa Ali Benassi is. I think it's important to know the association to Madonna, who did a film about coronavirus. And Betty Benassi did a funny lab glove version of coronavirus in a lab.
But you're going to want to really,
no, that's separate.
Dig down and make sure whether those, the brother and the sister are linked to the DJ and the Madonna
right.
and the crew.
And right, and the reason why I put that out there, I said, is there a link? Mm-hmm. So we did skip traces on all these people. Skip traces are records of phone records and so forth, and we found out that all of them had communications with IP addresses in China. I understand if I take my laptop to China and my wife takes her laptop to China, that there's going to be some communication there for the World Games. But it was odd that Betty Benassi also had communications, IP communications with China. It's almost like, I don't know, he's so close to this virus and close to the Chinese breakout of the virus, or at least communicating to China. And I would like somebody to go interview Madonna and Ali Benassi and Betty Benassi and just ask him, who were you talking to in China? It's just a question, right?
Okay.
And as far as the bioweapon concerns, we have two officers from NATO, or two people in NATO at a NATO facility in Canada that have been sent home from the country, this key, QIU, for stealing biological secrets. And remember, we have a senator from the United States, Tom Cotton, who sits on the Intelligence Committee saying it's a bioweapon. This is a bioweapon attack against the United States. So looking down the bioweapon trail is not speculation. It's not conspiracy theory. We have them on their side, the China side, saying it's a bioweapon brought to us by the United States. So looking down the bioweapon.
Well, they didn't go that far. They didn't really say that.
They said, give me the data.
Yeah, they said it's implied, but it's not stated. So. And in fact, I think we looked into the ambassador, said that was not the.
He did poo-pooed the idea.
He completely bashed that. Whereas, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's worth
But what I was trying to do.
The whole thing raises these conspiracy-minded suspicions, and it's worth looking into, and it's worth doing a deep dives. But
well, let's just take the most famous conspiracy theory with JFK being shot by Oswald, lone gunman, right? We're perfectly told that that's a good explanation, but if I say a lone cyclist brought the bioweapon, that's conspiracy theory, right? But the government wanted us to believe the lone gunman theory. But let's say you didn't know that.
But even you're not saying that. You're saying it's possible, right?
I'm saying it's possible.
It's possible, but not inevitable, right?
Right. But I'm just saying, let's say we didn't know Oswald went to China for 2 years. We didn't know that he married Marina Oswald.
Went to Russia.
Went to Russia, excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Soviet Union, actually. It's in Belarus, yeah.
Yeah, Belarus. And we didn't know he worked at the Japan U-2 radar thing. It was a top secret. We didn't know any of that. Would it be a good reporter to bring that forward? Because the CIA sure brought it forward when they were trying to paint Oswald as the lone gunman and the KGB training him somehow to kill Kennedy, right? So I find this like double-edged sword here, because if you add background and possible connections, you're a conspiracy theorist until we do it. Until we do it at the intel agencies, then it's the way things happened. All I'm trying to do is the same thing the Chinese government is asking for, which is get the information, test all the athletes, and then provide the information.
And more information coming out of the CDC regarding the deceased flu victims who were subsequently found to have been, have died from the COVID-19. But then on top of that, you have another bucket of another bucket of research, right?
Right.
You've got your bucket of research involving vaping. Right, and that, I think you really have to put that into the category of very speculative. Yeah.
Okay, so what Len's talking about is people don't realize there was a big vaping outbreak. Remember that there is precedence for the story of loose bios. Okay, the Fort Detrick is shut down in August of 2019. Loose bioweapons. Okay, that's why it's shut down. So we know somebody got the loose bios. In September, we have this vaping death spree that a lot of people don't remember in a form that's very coronavirus-like. It's a mystery virus. It's called a mystery virus by the CDC. The CDC guy, Redfield, the spokesman, says that they were first thought to be flu, influenza, but later found out to be, when they did the autopsies, it was coronavirus. But he won't say what cities people died in. But we had people in Kansas, we had people in Florida, we had people in Georgia, we had people in Massachusetts dying. And again, vaping is a much lower, a much bigger charge, if you will, when you're burning your lungs with the vape, the hot vape smoke. You're causing these micro tears where you're exposing you don't have the epithelium to defend against normal pathogens, and you're 14 times more likely if you're a heavy smoker to get coronavirus. So if something else is in the air or something else is in the water at the same time you're vaping, I'm not saying it's in the vaping cartridge itself. I don't think you can live in the vaping cartridge unless it's activated in some way, like charcoal activation filters. But if you did charcoal activate it, or some other activation method, or you just had another person spreading it somehow in the beer or in the wine or in the spraying air, in the air for a show, at a big show, you could have the deadly combination. Remember, they're flu-like viruses, these deaths in September, preceding the Wuhan Games. Their weakness, shortness of breath, pneumonia-like observation, the ground glass opacity in the lungs, all those things.
And that you have on independently, right? So
I have that independently.
So the previous four corresponding symptoms, those were widely reported, but the
ground glass opacity for the actual CAT scanning is a well-known. Well, you'll just see it. You have to Google it. Unfortunately, I can't put it up here now, but it is one of the presentations for coronavirus.
Right. So I guess the key thing though is, as you go along, as a journalist, we it's like there's this epistemology. How do you know what you know, right? So you have to constantly tell everybody, he said, she said. How do I know what I know? Putting the dates on the times and facts and everything. That's why, for me, I prefer to do everything in writing, because then you can sit down and you can nail everything down that way.
Right.
So,
right.
But
no,
anyway.
those are all good things. And first thing that Lee Stranahan told me to do is to build a timeline, and I am building a timeline. I am building an index for all this stuff. But I don't think is it's conspiracy theory, because I'm presenting facts. Now, whether the facts are related or not, whether the vaping deaths in the U.S. in September for a very corona-like presentation are related to the coronavirus deaths that happened a month later in Wuhan, we don't know. Those may or may not be related, but I am presenting facts in both of those cases. I am presenting facts that Maatje Benassi is related to Madonna, and so is Ali Benassi, and they are the patient one in the hotspot area of Milan. We had, I guess, 919 deaths in Italy today. Russia, China, and a couple of other countries are sending their response teams. So this is not something that's not on the world's mind right now. So looking at the root cause is something I think is pretty good, pretty fundamental. So
very good. Yeah.
So any final thoughts? No final thoughts. Thank you very much, Len Bracken. You can get New China Syndrome on Amazon.
Amazon, yeah.
New China Syndrome, where he talks a lot about trade, and the mercantile aspect of our relationship to China, and then
there are photographs of Wuhan in there. Yeah.
There are photographs of Wuhan in there, and I do like the fact you were on Capitol Hill and you did go to these the embassies quite often, and did speak to these different people. You have worked in these circles for a long time on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, actually, I was in the Chinese embassy, which is actually built to resemble the caves of Guilin, and kind of an amazing thing. But all that was long before the virus.
But indeed, now we do have a new China syndrome. Thanks, everyone.